Hello, everyone. This is going to be our chapter wrap up for chapter 5, the judicial branch of the judiciary. I'm going to try to finish this one in under 12 minutes. I'm joined today by Mr. Mook. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, Supreme Court, they pretty much cover every single court case you can possibly think of, and the topics range from abortion to zoning. The Supreme Court usually now, though, covers things that we call culture wars. So, usually the most controversial topics in our society. So, things like immigration, abortion, prayer in school. These are the types of things they like to cover. Three main issues with the branch. You should know these. The main one to know, though, is legitimacy, which is number one. And that is the power problem with the federal courts is the Supreme Court justices are appointed to life terms. We don't vote for them directly. They're selected by the president, and those appointees are confirmed by the Senate. Supreme Court over time, okay? Over time, they have switched which area of law that they like to focus in. In the first era, they like to focus on defining national and state government powers. The court actually became relevant during this time period, specifically in 1801 when Chief Justice John Marshall took over, okay? Now, this picture right here is, I want to say, in the chapter 2 PowerPoint slides. What we will discuss the most out of court cases here is going to be Marbury versus Madison, okay? Now, the Marshall Court focused on defining national government powers and kind of expanding power within that area. The Taney Court, which you have, which is Chief Justice Roger Taney, followed up by actually doing the opposite, making sure that state power was preserved. Okay, this gets the idea of dual federalism, which is our chapter for the upcoming week. You don't need to know this term yet, something that you will need to know for next chapter though. After this, we have the development economic regulation era. Now, during this time, the court decided we're no longer going to be focused on defining government powers. What we will focus on is the economy, okay? Now, there was a controversy during this time, okay? We were going through a financial crisis, the Great Depression. President Roosevelt tries to get us out of this with New Deal policies, okay? Now, these New Deal policies had three R's, okay? Relief, recovery, and reform, okay? The public was on board with it. The other branches were on board. The only one who was holding us back was the court. As a result, President Roosevelt threatened the court, saying that he would pack it with more Supreme Court justices. Right now, there's officially 9. There's always been 9. He wanted to add 6 more to change it to 15, so they could rule in his favor. Suddenly, the court kind of backed off because they got scared and decided we are no longer going to handle things on the economy. We're going to leave that up to the president, especially during a time of crisis. Next, we have the liberal nationalism era. We see a switch once again, and instead of focusing on defining government powers or the economy, they decide to focus on civil liberties. Because of this, we get Miranda versus Arizona. It's one of the most popular court cases, okay? Which is police officers have to notify a suspect of your rights when questioning them, okay? This era of the court focused more on judicial activism on behalf of these civil liberties, okay? Now, really quick, some advice from me, legal advice. I usually like to go on a little 15-minute rant maybe in class about this. Number one, don't break the law. Number two, if you do break the law, do not say anything. The first thing it says is the right to remain silent. The best thing that you can do in any situation is remain civil and not really stir up any more issues. Typically, when people get pulled over, you're in your emotions, you're upset, you're mad. It's just not smart for you to talk. Remember, you are not an expert in the law or interpreting the law. Who are experts? The court is, lawyers, judges, okay? So it is best for you if you start to talk, you might actually self-incriminate yourself or you might get yourself into even more trouble. So it's best to do what? Be quiet, try to stay calm, and then first off, just don't get into trouble. But that's my advice for you. I'll give you guys some more advice later on in the semester during the crime policy chapter. Now, the counter-conservative revolution. This is the era that we're at today. Mainly, we are focusing on culture war issues, okay? This is Roe v. Wade, okay? This is the immigration laws, okay? Everything that gets handled in the court is what people are usually protesting over. Our court today is conservative. We have a rightward movement due to both having Republican presidents and having Democrat candidates who were conservative. So we had a string of these presidents. Also, during this period, too, we see the courts tend to switch when it comes to criminal justice. They actually start to become a little bit more tougher on crime rather than protecting individuals, like with Miranda versus Arizona. Roe v. Wade, you should know this court case, okay? 2 times we voted on it. 7-2 vote initially in 1973 and 5-4 in 2022. So this was recently overturned. The main issue with this court case, it wasn't whether or not people are pro-life or pro-abortion. It was around whether or not abortion is protected under the 14th Amendment. Okay. In 1973, 7 Supreme Court justices felt that that was okay. It was fine. In 2022, this was overturned. The reason why this is big, though, is because I don't think that 5-4 vote really represents what most people want here in America. I can argue that most people in America actually think that abortion should be legal, mainly the My Body, My Choice movement. Okay. Currently, right now, though, there's a federal ban against abortion, so it's illegal at the national level and legal at the state. Since this court case was ruled on, though, both presidents have decided not really to enforce it, so it's not really that much of a priority. However, they can change their mind whenever. Okay. Is this something the court will go back and vote on again? I'm not too sure, but obviously there's a big pushback because most people in America do not really, or America, the public's perception of this issue does not really match this 5-4 vote. I think it still matches a 7-2 or maybe even a 6-3 vote. Okay. Increased power of the courts, nothing really big there. You do need to know judicial review. Now, judicial review actually comes from a court case called Marbury versus Madison. Okay. Now, this is the court's most powerful, or this is the court's main power. What happens? This guy, William Marbury, okay, gets selected by President John Adams. Okay, so he's appointed. Okay, his commission was signed but was never delivered. So what ends up happening? Thomas Jefferson, the next president, steps in, sees his commission sitting there on the desk. Rather than delivering his commission, he decides to throw it away because, as in the president's mind, they would most likely want to nominate their own Supreme Court justice member because they're there for life. So unless the only way they lose their job is if they die, they retire, or they resign. Marbury goes around, tells everyone, hey, I got this job, shows up to work day one. They're wondering, what are you doing here, man? You don't work here. And he's like, yeah, I got confirmed. What do you mean? Turns out, since his paperwork was thrown away, a new person took his position. He used the Judiciary Act 1789 to go to the Supreme Court, who he was supposed to work for, asking them to give him the job. What ends up happening from this court case? They decided that, yeah, that is unconstitutional, but we don't have the power to fix that right now. So we will use this situation to give the court the power to decide what is constitutional and unconstitutional, which is the power of judicial review. So even though this guy doesn't get his job, he actually helps the Supreme Court in giving them the power that they have today. Okay. And this is what made the court a little bit more relevant. It was not all relevant at all until obviously Chief Justice John Marshall stepped in. They have this Marbury versus Madison court case, and they get the power of judicial review. Judicial review is a well-established power of the courts, and it's been used in almost every single court case. They're deciding what is constitutional or not, mainly because they decided that they will be interpreting the law, and the Constitution is the law of the land. Restraint versus activism, okay? Real quick, you should know both of these. Judicial restraint, the court plays a limited role. They take a back seat. They leave some precedents alone, and they leave the Constitution based how it is, based off the intent. Activism, they're actively trying to change things to kind of fit along with the more current times. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's subjective. It's just a way that they can strategize, okay? An example of judicial activism is going back and changing Roe v. Wade. Okay, judicial restraint would have been leaving that court case alone. Courts as a government institution, two primary functions here. Okay, to solve issues peacefully, that is number one, dispute resolution, and number two, interpreting the law. Okay, now dispute resolution is important in a peaceful manner because not everyone can fight out their problems. Okay, and if everyone did, it would not be fair. Okay. Therefore, the court allows for us to sit in a peaceful setting and we have both parties and they get to explain to one another or to a jury, which is supposed to be random people, and those peers or your peers get to decide who is in the right and who is in the wrong. We believe this is the most fair way to settle conflict, okay? Let's think of a couple examples of this. Some of you guys have younger siblings, okay? Or you might be the older sibling. If you have siblings and you were to fight your siblings, maybe there's a conflict that you have. Is the person who is always in the right, would they win that fight physically? Probably not, which is why it's unfair. Why might it be unfair too for your parents to be the judge of who is in the right or the wrong? They might have a favorite child, okay? Now, if a random group of people seen a conflict arise between you and a sibling, they would be able to properly judge you or decide who's in the right or wrong because they hold no connection to you. They're just going based off of the arguments that each side is presenting and the evidence that is in front of them. Next thing is going to be law interpretation. Goes back to chapter 1. What is the definition of unreasonable search and seizure? What is cruel and unusual punishment? What is the definition of swerving? What is the definition of aggressive? Okay, self-defense, assault. They get to argue that. Now, the Supreme Court handles around 75 to 100 court cases a year. Okay, now they receive around 7,000 to 10,000 petitions. Okay, I don't really want to go into too much about this, but just know the court is primarily an appellate court, so they hear court cases from the second time. So that means there's a court case at one of these lower, at a district court level. Happens, people are upset about the issue. Supreme Court steps in and says, hey, we need to legislate some type of remedy because there's a disagreement over either the conflict resolution or interpreting the law. Now, you're probably wondering, why do they only handle around like 10% of the court cases that they get? The reason for this is a lot of the petitions they get are real similar court cases. So when they handle one of them, it pretty much solves all the others, okay? So they will reference it as precedent before, okay? So they don't have to hear the same court case 100 times or on a similar issue. They'll just say, hey, look, we have a reference there. You go to that. We made a decision on something similar on this. Use that as your reasoning as to what we think is either constitutional or not. And that is how that case will actually get handled. Okay. Now, selection of federal judges. Okay. Remember, they're selected by the president. They're confirmed by the Senate. Only way they lose their job: die, retire, resign. Okay. There's a strategy towards this. They try to pick someone who ideologically fits to them. So the president wants to pick someone who kind of matches, like the same values as them. The Senate obviously is going to want someone that matches more with them. Therefore, they kind of have to find a balance and negotiate some middle ground, okay? This is obviously problematic because do we want a president to select someone for the rest of their life that has values that reflect theirs? Maybe not if the public doesn't have a good perception of them, okay? But there's no qualifications for this, but typically most Supreme Court members do have some legal experience, usually at a lower court level, okay? All these individuals up here too, by the way, they all have some apprentices. So usually the first in line to take their job, or as their successors, their apprentices. That'll happen if the president likes who that Supreme Court justice is, and if the Senate's like, you know what, we like the balance that we have, we might as well leave that person in there, or leave someone similar to them. Okay, if not, it'll be anyone else. Remember, they just have to get confirmed, and these people are up there for a while. People used to be very upset that our Supreme Court was mainly old white men. We actually have some diversity here now. Okay, when's the next time that we'll see a switch? Maybe next president. I don't think Donald Trump will get to elect another one, but that's depends on whether or not one of these people resigns, retires, or sadly passes away. Now, deciding court cases. This is actually what your next discussion post is going to be on. Okay, there are 4 ways in which court cases are decided. Okay, number 1, the plain meaning of the words. This is the most legal way. So, if you are speeding, 56 and a 55. That is speeding. By definition of the law, you are breaking the law. That is going by the plain meaning of the words. Intention of the framers, what the words actually mean. Okay? The speed limit is 55. You are going 56. Okay? Why is the speed limit there? The speed limit might be there because we want individuals to drive at a safe speed within the area. Okay? Does that mean that 56 isn't as safe as 55? Maybe not, right? You might say that, well, that's not excessive speeding, so why would they pull someone over for that? Precedent. This is known as stare decisis. Okay? Depending on how you pulled the last person over, or whether or not you gave the last person a ticket, depends on whether you pulled that person over as well. So if you pulled someone over last time who was going 56 and a 55, and you see another individual going 56 and 55, you're going to pull them over every single time. Doesn't matter. You're going based off the previous decision that was made. Now, say you don't, then you do the opposite, right? You're like, you know what? Most cops usually, by the way, they usually wait until you're going like 10 over to pull you over. Their precedent might be, you know what? If they're going 10 over, I'm going to give them a ticket, okay? They're not going 10 over, I'm not going to give them a ticket, or maybe won't even pull you over. Maybe they pull you over, give you a warning, something like that. But they will have the same exact behavior every single time because they're going based off of the previous decision that was made. Now, interpretation. This is the most political. This is just subjective at this point, okay? This is not going based off of what the law, what is wrong and right. This is just going based off of, do I think this person should get in trouble for this right now? Okay? Well, like, be honest, if someone's going 70 and a 55, do they always need a speeding ticket? Maybe not. Maybe they're driving because it was an emergency, okay? And interpretation, maybe someone is driving under the speed limit, okay? And but the weather conditions are, or maybe they're driving the speed limit and the weather conditions are really bad. You can actually get ticketed for that because they're interpreting that you are not driving at a safe speed for the weather conditions, okay? So number one, most legal way of deciding something, going by the base meaning. Interpretation is the most political. This is obviously going to look at more of like the values of an individual, okay, on who's judging you. Precedent is just let the previous decision stand. I already went over this, don't have to talk about it. We have a 51 court state system, one Supreme Court. I use Florida as an example. Every state has this though. Every federal court, Supreme Court, we have Supreme Court. Every state has a Supreme Court. There's District Court of Appeals, and there's going to be circuit and county courts within our legal system. Okay. Also, one last fun fact to end the chapter: the highest court that we have in the Supreme Court. So our Supreme Court actually has a basketball court. They call this the highest court in the land. Search it up. I'm not lying. In Washington, D.C., a lot of politicians go there and they like to hoop in their free time, and some of the Supreme Court justices as well. So that concludes our chapter for this week. Hopefully, you guys have a good one, and I will see you guys next week for chapter 6.